Good morning. Welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Halifax. My name is Pam Griffin-Hody, and I am today's service leader. Reverend Norm Hofker is our minister. Jessica Friesen is our music director. Marie-Claude Leroux is our director of religious exploration. And this morning, John Piccolo is our volunteer technical director. If you are not already receiving notifications from our church, and you would like to receive updates on our activities and services, please send an email to minister@uuch.ca. Before the service begins, I have a few announcements. The order of service for today was sent out over UU Info yesterday. Please see the order of service for a complete list of announcements. Here are some highlights. Your minister, the Reverend Norm Hofker, is on leave for a month. He will be back in the pulpit on March 27th for a special service with the UU Church in Bangor, Maine, celebrating the running of the maple sap in spring. In line with changes to the public health COVID-19 provincial restrictions, we are no longer requiring proof of vaccination for people attending church. We are still requiring masks and asking people to observe social distancing until March 21st, when all provincial restrictions will be lifted. It's time to apply for a place in the Pride Parade again. And this announcement didn't make the order of service. I just got it this morning. But we have lost several strong committee members. We have been part of this event every year since it started. So it would be great to continue our strong public support for the LGBTQ community. There will be a brief information Zoom call tomorrow evening, Monday at 8 o'clock, to judge if we have enough people to make the commitment again. I have no idea how you will get the Zoom link if you can't find the meeting Zoom link in your inbox. However, since Margaret Galbraith sent me the announcement this morning, you could try emailing Margaret to get a Zoom link, or maybe we can send it out over UU Info, but the meeting is tomorrow at 8 o'clock. As well, Marilyn has a special announcement from the Canadian Unitarian Council.
This did go out yesterday on UU Info, but I just wanted to talk about it briefly because we, your refugee committee, are getting questions about the Ukrainians and what can we do for them, where can we give money. And so I just wanted to emphasize a few things that were in the announcement from the CUC, especially some UU places that you could give money. So refer back to that email if you still have it in your inbox, but the UUSC that's the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which is American, not the Canadian one. That doesn't exist by that name anymore. So the UUSC Emergency Relief Fund is one. Also, the International Women's Convocation are raising money specifically for UU churches in Hungary in order for them to have the supplies they need as they welcome the fleeing Ukrainians into Romania. And then the Hungarian Unitarian Church is also another possible place. Otherwise, if you want to keep it to Canadian charities, some like Doctors Without Borders, the Red Cross, another one is the Humanitarian Coalition, which is Oxfam and several other things. And I don't think this needs to be said to this group, but it's money, not stuff, that they need. Getting stuff over there is quite a silly endeavor and might never get to where it's going. Thank you.
then over to Jessica for an announcement.
Hi, so it's time for our annual coffee house. It's coming up on March 26th at 7 p.m. That's on Saturday. This is a time where we come together, enjoy each other's company, our own congregants' talent. This year, the Unitarian Universalist Society of Bangor is joining us in the celebration, and the community where they're located in Maine. So if you could email me if you want to volunteer, if you want to share poetry, music, that would be great. I'm looking forward to it. So now for the prelude, I am going to be playing and singing a Simon and Garfunkel piece called Old Friends. Old friends, sat on the park bench like bookends. The newspaper blown through the grass falls on the round toes of the high shoes of the old friends. Old friends, winter companions, the old men, lost in their overcoats, waiting for the sunset. The sound of the city sifting through trees settles like dust on the shoulders of the old friends. Can you imagine years from today, sharing a park bench quietly? How terribly strange to be 70. Old friends, memory brushes the same years, silently sharing the same fears.
Here in Kufutchuk, named by the settlers Halifax, members and friends of the Unitarian Fellowship of Halifax acknowledge we are meeting on unceded territory. These lands have been cared for by the Mi'kmaq and Maliseet peoples for centuries. If we are to be in true reconciliation, we will learn the ways of the Aboriginal elders and the water keepers to preserve this fragile climate.
Our chalice lighting this morning is called In This Time of Uncertainty and was written by the Reverend Amy Williams Clark early in the pandemic. I'm hoping somebody can come up to light the chalice after the reading, and I'm hoping that we can attempt, even though most of us are on Zoom, to read this in unison, please. We gather in this time of uncertainty, full of unknowns, as angst closes in among us. We light this chalice with a flame that draws us together. With this flame, we cut through the darkness of isolation and are warmed by the fires of our interconnection. For this moment, this radical moment, we find a certainty within the noble bonds of love and community. And now Jessica will lead us in our opening hymn.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store. Nature in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Let's do one more verse. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall. The chorus of life resounding as one. Everyone, gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to share the story Outside In, Outside Inside by Liu and Pham. Something strange happened on an unremarkable day just before the season changed. Everybody who was outside went inside. Everyone, everywhere, all over the world. Everyone just went inside, shut their doors, and waited. Well, almost everyone. Some people needed to be where they needed to be. Outside, the sky was quiet, but the wind still blew and birds kept singing. Raccoons came out and squirrels played in the streets, but the cars stayed away. The world felt a little different. Inside, we baked and cooked, made music and watched TV. We read and played games. Some of us worked a little, some of us worked a lot, and some of us couldn't work at all. We all felt a little different. Outside, there were fences both real and pretend. Swings sat still and slides were lonely. Bells didn't ring and halls were empty. We had birthdays without parties, shared words without sounds, and reached each other without touching. The world was changing a tiny bit outside. Inside, we waited and we worried. We laughed and we cried, and we tried to breathe. We made things together and did things alone. We hoped and prayed and wished. We were all changing a tiny bit inside. So why did we all go inside? Well, there were lots of reasons, but mostly because everyone knew that it was the right thing to do. On the outside, we're all different, but on the inside, we're all the same. And we remembered that soon spring would come, inside and outside. The author, Liu Yunfeng, notes that this book started when she started sketching moments from each day as a way to cope during the quarantine. Nearly every face painted in this book is inspired by a person, from people in the news, by a real person, from people in the news to family, friends, and neighbors. The images inside the hospital are based on real events. For example, the grateful man showing through the hospital window his love for the nurses who saved his wife's life. This book is a recording of the daily acts of kindness and humanity made by everyday people over the past 2 years.
Thank you, Marie-Claude. This is a sacred time in our service to reflect on our joys and sorrows. A time set apart to honor the many sorrows and the many joys that you, the members and friends of this congregation, are living, and to acknowledge the mutual support of our community. We will light one candle for all those who are here with us or in our thoughts, who are struggling mentally, physically, financially, or emotionally. And we will also light one candle for all the joys that are in the room, the big joys that come along only infrequently, and the little joys that we are blessed by every day if we are able to see them. I would like to light a candle for Rodney Vaughan, who passed away this week, and also for his wife, Barbara Harsani, and family. I would like to light one candle for the people of Ukraine, where over 2.5 million, I can't comprehend that number, people have now fled from the Russian invasion. They are in our heart. But I have 2 more candles to light, lest we forget wars and suffering in other parts of the world. One for the people of Yemen, where in a conflict that is now many years old, there are, according to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, over 4 million refugees. And another candle for the people of Palestine, whose troubles predate my own life. And during this time of remembering 2 years under COVID, let us light a candle for the millions who have died and for the millions around the world who still have no access to vaccines. Each week we invite anyone who would like a candle lit to email us with the details. Is there anyone in the sanctuary who would like to light a candle?
Yes, please. Shall I come over to the microphone?
Yeah, I think maybe better. Sorry.
It's all right. Okay. So just continuing on that theme, would you please light one candle for all the refugees in the world, and the 70,000 alone who have applications in to come to Canada, but because of COVID and many other reasons are backlogged and not getting here. And lastly, a candle of joy. Yesterday we had a work bee, and 17 people showed up from 9 to 90 and plunged right in and did a marvelous job of cleaning up this place. Of course, we're not done, but we got a lot done. Thanks to all those people.
May the joys and sorrows, both those acknowledged here this morning and those held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, weave us together in the interdependent fabric of community. And now Jessica will lead us into the interlude.
Please sing with me number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. My life flows on in endless song above earth's limitation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest around me roars? I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness around me close? Song in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to the rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrant trembles as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell, to dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? It was the music, the community singing together, that I missed first and missed longest. Music is still there in many formats, but my lone voice singing alone at home or with Jessica over my laptop was profoundly lonely. This hymn, though, became top 40 in my house. The first verse is my hand-washing timing song. It became so habitual that I've caught myself singing in public washrooms. Even a startled audience at a mass town, a big stop, and a random Ontario en route where they really, really thought I was weird. The buzz now is all about living with COVID as we approach March 21st and the lifting of most restrictions and the state of emergency, but surely we have already been living with COVID for 2 years. On March the 11th, 2020, the board held its regular meeting with everybody in person except for Arvid on Zoom from the Annapolis Valley. I can't even actually remember if he was on the board then, but he's the lone Zoomer. And decided that March 15th would be the last in-person service for 2 weeks. Most other Halifax religious groups held their last regular services the previous week. We held out for a week. On March 13th, 2 years ago today, the federal government closed offices, and the universities were closed. And I guess other offices were, but I remember that day. I remember March 13th because I was driving to Ottawa to deliver a cat. And I was sitting having a coffee in the middle of a snowstorm, wondering if I was going to get any further that day when my phone started going off because I'm still on all the university lists and that Carleton was closing and everyone was to go home. They're still not back to work, most of those people. I mean, they've been working from home now for over 2 years. On March the 16th, the board held a special meeting under the realization that the suspension of in-person services was going to have to be longer than 2 weeks. On March the 21st, so that would be 2 years next week, we held our first Zoom service. And the very next day, I don't know if there was a coincidence or not, the Nova Scotia government declared the state of emergency, which still stands. And it's on April the 5th, which was the third Zoom Sunday, I made a home chalice. I took a lot of care. I had lit a candle at home during the first couple of weeks, but that seemed to be the date that I decided I needed something special going forward. And I'm going to tell you about that chalice later, but there's a picture of the chalice, my chalice, and it's the picture that's actually on the cover of the Order of Service today. I called this service the Terrible Twos. What I remember about my children's terrible twos is a quest for independence while being afraid of the unknown, and sudden outbursts of anger, sometimes source unknown, mostly because of not being able to understand the restrictions on their lives. You know, a meltdown on a sidewalk because you physically restrain them from running out into traffic, or sudden distrust of everything and hiding behind your legs, usually while tripping you. And in the past 2 years, we've seen fear, a longing for independence, and lots of anger. We've seen it unfold in extreme on our TV screens, coming from Ottawa especially, and in our newspapers. But to a certain degree, I think a lot of us can also see it in ourselves, at least I can. I was angry in 2020 when I was forbidden to enter New Brunswick. I have elderly family there. I had a property I was trying to sell, got an offer and was forbidden to travel there. I literally had to drive to the border and cry to some border guard to let me go and clean my personal effects out of my late husband's house. I was even angrier when we were all put into HRM jail over Christmas 2020. But nothing made me angrier last spring when for a month or so no one was allowed to enter Nova Scotia. That anger was certainly tied with fear. My daughter lives away. What if I were sick and needed her? And I was terrified by the COVID rates where she lives, and I wanted her to come home. It was absolute total rage and blinding fear. But mostly over the last 2 years, the adult in my soul took over from the 2-year-old, and I embraced public health restrictions and was full of gratitude that I lived in Nova Scotia and for Dr. Strang. And how did we change as a congregation? Through the technical expertise of Paul Galbraith and John Piccolo and our minister Norm Herofker, we were able to move instantly to Zoom on that very first Sunday. Other faith communities used platforms such as Facebook Live, which is not as easily participatory. We are so fortunate. Our meetings all moved to Zoom, and we learned a different way to do and continue. Our sit-down Saturday brunch morphed almost immediately to a takeaway brown bag delivered at the door. A group of sandwich and bag makers came on Fridays. I was asked one week to come help, and I never stopped coming. For much of the pandemic, the sandwich makers were the only people I saw in person, week in and week out. An unexpected blessing, a creation of community. Today I've asked some members of our congregation to share with you some of their thoughts or experiences during the pandemic. And I'm going to call Colin Kerr up first. Colin.
Well, I could never match Pam's eloquence on this topic, but I can offer maybe a couple of observations over this period. I've never been the most talkative or sociable individual in the room. And during the COVID period, with all the mask wearing and social distancing, I've been able to be myself without suffering the opprobrium that is due to people that behave that way. So that's been a slight benefit. The other thing I could say is that from the very beginning, let's see now, this is day 734, so it's over 2 years. From the very beginning, I knew without a doubt that I was not going to catch the virus. Why? Well, I can't really say, except I think it's probably got something to do with the Scots' sixth sense, which I inherited from my mother, who was a Highlander, and in fact, I've been going around masquerading as a Canadian for quite a while. I'm not really one. I came from Scotland to begin with. However, it did allow during this period to carry on normally without fear of the virus at all. So I haven't had such a bad time as most people, and I'm happy about that, even though it has been a terrible period. And that's about all I have to say.
Thank you, Colin. Jessica will now lead us in hymn 1012, When I Am Frightened, which has been one of the themes of the pandemic.
I was sitting on my hands and now my hands are falling asleep. Just a second. Okay, here we go. When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I'm uncertain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me, sing to me quietly? Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I'm angry, when I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me, sing by me willingly? Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me, comfort me tenderly? Will you share some of your feelings with me? Everyone, if you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
And Amy Moonshadow has some thoughts on the pandemic.
Well, it's 2 years later, and I know so much more about the intersection of invisibility. Isolation has not been my friend. The first lockdown left me homeless. Myself and others facing rent evictions were told we just had to beat the streets harder to find a place to live. Suitable accommodations locating in March is not so easy in the big city. So good luck, more than good management, provided me a connection, and I got moved into a more befitting location. I'm a very social person, and living like a hermit has not been easy. Without the internet, that intersection of invisibility is very prevalent. Zoom calls, if they are available, don't always cut it. Mute now has a new meaning in my life. The horror of the world has silenced the everyday activities of folks trying to make ends meet. There has been no middle ground. You've been either a masker or a mask-off person. The implications of fighting for one's individual rights over that of the bigger community is fracturing what was a fragile world to start with. I am trying to find solace in the creativity of heart and mind for art. Music calms the soul. With the longer days of sunlight, I will glory in all creation and all that it has to offer. I hope to get a garden in this year.
Thank you, Amy. And now, due to sorry about that. Thank you, Amy. And now, because of the blessings of Zoom, we're going to hear from Paige Wakarchuk, who actually is joining us from Kentville. Paige?
Good morning, everybody. All right. First, I'd just like to acknowledge, hold space for, and honor all of the people that the pandemic is still impacting and will likely continue to impact long after the restrictions are lifted. For the vulnerable and the marginalized who continue to have to fight to be treated with compassion and the human dignity that they deserve. I know I'm not alone when I say COVID changed everything. These past 2 years have been incredibly hard at times, and they've impacted my life in some significant ways. I'd like to share some of the more major influences with you today. COVID showed me all the ways that I've been struggling in my daily life. Many of my unconscious coping mechanisms were stripped away. And this was deeply unsettling and compounded my fears about what was happening in the world around me. But eventually it gave my difficulties a name. I now know that I'm autistic. This discovery is leading to a much deeper understanding of myself, and I'm slowly learning to treat myself with more compassion than I have ever allowed. This knowing has allowed me to make some crucial decisions about my career path that I would not have made otherwise. I don't have an official diagnosis yet, and I don't know if that's really necessary. Like many health-related services, it's not a straightforward or inexpensive process. But having the language to advocate for my needs has already made a huge difference overall. I now have a job that I'm excited to go to every day. It suits my abilities, and it's a queer-centered space in an unlikely industry. Working with other queer people and being back in touch with that community has been a much-needed reunion. And I've also had the opportunity to reconnect with UUCH. Accessing virtual services has been a huge blessing. I miss everyone, and I do want to see you all again in person. But even just being on Zoom allowed me to tap back into my spirituality at a time when I really needed it most. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. This pandemic has torn the veil off many difficult issues, but it's also highlighted the helpers, the healers, and the teachers. It feels more vital than ever to lean into our shared humanity and embrace the lessons of mutuality. We're all interconnected, and these connections are sacred. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paige. And we will now have a reading from Tristan Saunier.
Splits the oak, it is you, gratitude, who helps us appreciate the years oak shaded our summers. When the answer is no instead of yes, oh gratitude, it is you who says, this is how we learn. When our carefully laid plans fail to bear fruit, it is you, gentle teacher, who shows us there are many ways to live a life.
Thank you, Tristan. During the summer of 2016, I was still living in Ottawa, but the countdown of how many sleeps before retiring and coming home had started. I took my usual summer vacation and for the first time drove solo from Ottawa to Halifax. Being mindful that it was my last opportunity for all of those, oh gee, I'd like to explore that someday, side trips, I decided to meander on Quebec back roads and take a couple of extra days driving back. Saturday night, I had stayed somewhere in greater suburban Montreal where I had found refuge after having to drive an extra hour in driving rain to find a vacancy. Adventures don't always work out, you know. Sunday morning, the sun shone brilliantly, and I set my GPS to take an alternate route to Ottawa, which took me to a roundabout under construction near Mirabel Airport. The GPS didn't work, and I kept exiting back onto the roundabout. And I wasn't alone in this. I kept seeing cars pulling off and checking their GPSs. So I decided to just randomly exit and drive a bit and regroup. But the GPS was having none of it and kept trying to get me back to the roundabout. So I decided to trust in the universe. Eventually, I saw a directional sign to Mont-Tremblant. So I decided if I randomly turned left, left is always good, I should end up at the Ottawa River and could probably then find Ottawa. Somewhere on one of those side roads, and I would never be able to find it again, I found an apiary, just a little one. Someone's home, they kept some beehives, they sold their extra product. I stopped for a break and puttered around this woman's little shop, bought some honey, and I bought some beeswax candles. The rest of my drive was, well, uneventful as far as bad roundabouts were concerned. I had a really nice lunch along the river, and I got on the highway accidentally north of Chelsea and was treated to an absolutely perfect view of the Parliament buildings and the river when I crested a hill. I got home, and I put the candles in my sideboard, taking them out every once in a while to smell them, and just remember that practically perfect, adventurous day. The largest pillar of those beeswax candles became my chalice. The one I talked about earlier, the one that the picture on the order of service. You can see the corner of my laptop and my iPad to read the order of service and the hymn book that inadvertently shared lockdown with me. On December the 6th, 2020, it finally burned down, and I added the second pillar candle of those beautiful beeswax candles to the melted wax. And there should be a slide now showing the same saucer with a pool of melted wax and a new candle. Sometime last summer, because this Zoom thing and Zoom church has really gone on for a long time, according to my candles, that candle was gone, and I started using the tea lights in a small pottery tea light holder with a chalice cutout that I purchased at a UU yard sale many years ago. That's slide 3. That picture has a date last week because I didn't take a picture of posterity whenever I started using that particular chalice. And there's no more beeswax candles. I'm burning tea lights from IKEA now. But I don't need the scent of those candles anymore to remember that glorious day of freedom as I hold it in my mind's eyes and my heart. And I hold other memories in my mind's eye and my heart. In the spring of 2020, when we were all told to stay the blazes home, I rebelled. I wanted to walk in the spring. I wanted to see flowers. I wanted to see the ocean. Not having anywhere I could legitimately be, I drove to church and I parked in the driveway and I walked around the front garden, admiring the spring flowers that had been so proudly and lovingly planted in anticipation of the CUC conference that didn't happen. I enjoyed the flowers. And then because I was downtown, I decided to go to my favorite bakery on Gottingen Street, which was available to do the, takeout. It was a food place. And I drove down Barrington Street in the middle of a weekday afternoon. And I was the only car. I decided, I had my windows open because it was a beautiful day and it was quiet, so I decided to park and listen. Did you know that there actually is street parking on Barrington Street by the Grand Parade? And I sat there with my open windows and I listened. And I closed my eyes and I listened, and the entire city sounded different. I couldn't put it into words. I tried. Well, I tried to remember what it sounded like. There were no people at all. I didn't see any people as I drove down Barrington Street that day. And I want to remember that. I want to remember how that sounded and felt. And I thought about that when Marie Claude was reading her story. My ride home was equally different. I mean, I've gone through the Armdale Rotary really late at night and been the only car. But at 3:30 on a sunny afternoon, I wanted to see the ocean, so I drove along the Purcell's Cove Road to get home. Of course, I couldn't stop anywhere because parks were forbidden. Let's not forget that they closed the parks. On my route that day, I could have gotten a coffee through Tim Hortons drive-thru and done my usual and gone down to Point Pleasant Park, but of course I couldn't because it was closed. My route home passes Fleming Park, the Dingle, Frog Pond. They were all closed. And as I got closer to Herring Cove, I thought, well, surely they're not going to, how would they close off the Herring Cove Provincial Park? It's a parking lot with a look-off. That's all it is. It's a look-off. There's some trails that go down to the ocean through cliffs. They had yellow tape across the parking lot. And there was nowhere to stop on the road where I could see the ocean because those were the only cars I saw that day, all parked precariously along the side of the road. For people that are very able and are still going to climb down those cliffs because who's ever going to catch them and find them, right? It was foolish. I parked there yesterday afternoon thinking about that when that parking lot was closed. And I watched the high waves in yesterday's storm. And for me, that was the one thing that scared me the most, was the parks being closed. I had nowhere to walk. I don't have sidewalks where I live. It's really busy. I don't walk that fast, and there were a lot of people out there doing their daily 1 hour. And there's nowhere for me to jump to distance from people. When I came downtown, I thought I might take a walk along English Street. But there were actually a lot of people walking along here, and I decided that I should probably not be that close to actual people. Well, let's not forget those first horrible months. Just like my candles, we've seen lots of ups and downs. We've come together in community and the loss of members, sometimes in person, sometimes completely on Zoom. But whatever was permitted at the time, we were together in community. Last fall, for 5 minutes, we joyfully saw the children temporarily return to the worship room, only to have them realize they should go directly upstairs since children were yet to be vaccinated. Then a few months ago, with the surge brought on by Omicron, we saw everything in person be forbidden again. And here we are, even though people are permitted in the sanctuary. And today, there's 6 people in the sanctuary today, and that includes me and Jessica. A week from tomorrow is the first day of spring. Already a friend has posted a photo of blooming crocuses somewhere on the peninsula. I want to know where it is because I want to go and look. I sort of know where he lives. Maybe I'll just randomly drive around that part of town. March 21st is not only the first day of spring, it also brings the lifting of most public health restrictions, as well as the state of emergency. And spring always brings in hope. My hope is that we come together in joy, but also with love and caring. And perhaps that means wearing those masks and keeping our distance just a little bit longer. When I was looking for readings for this service, I looked at the ones in the back of the green hymn book and found this one by Paul Robeson, and I thought it was appropriate to close my words. Sorrow will one day turn to joy. All that breaks the heart and oppresses the soul will one day give place to peace and understanding, and everyone will be free. And Marilyn has a few words to say.
These are words about the Offertory, and I believe you will see the slide on the screen, as always, that tells you how and where to send your money. As you know, we rely on donations to pay our staff and keep the building running, and to help with our programs such as the Saturday brunch. Because we've been plugging the Saturday brunch for the last couple of months, it is now looking quite healthy, and this morning I would like to suggest that any donations you care to send might be dedicated to the minister's discretionary fund. Thank you.
Our closing hymn, I hope, speaks to the emotions in our hearts going forward. Jessica?
Soon the day will arrive when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. That's perfect. 146, slides are on the screen. Soon the day will arrive when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world this can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our heart. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and a promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me.
Our words for extinguishing our chalice today is called Benediction for a People in Pandemic by the Reverend Anya Samler Michael. When faced with a challenge such as this, we can turn toward one another, or we can turn against. We can ignore the cries of our neighbors, or we can let them cry into the arms of our witness. We can respond with indifference to systemic injustice, or we can commit to its undoing. Good souls, tales will be told of how we responded when this particular hell was visited upon our earth. Let us know, and let it be said by generations to come, that when the pain of our separation was revealed, we moved closer to the promised land of our beloved community. Thank you all who attended the service today. I will say goodbye to those who joined us by YouTube now as we end our live streaming. For those who joined by Zoom, in a few minutes we will return to sharing joys and sorrows, followed by our virtual coffee hour. Thank you again. The streaming service will now end.